we'll be reporting more on that in a moment or two, but we want to take you live to Birmingham, where the Chancellor George Osborne is about to make a major speech. We're going to hear more about the continuing austerity programme. Over to the Chancellor.
Here on the news that our economy is recovering, people wonder what it means for them. And for some, it feels abstract, remote. But there's nothing abstract about the 200 new employees this company has created in the last year, or the 400 additional people that Sertec has announced just now it will be taking on over the next 4 years. And that is a vote of confidence in the workforce here. It's a vote of confidence in the Midlands. And it's also a vote of confidence in the economic plan that is working for Britain. This factory is a good place to talk about that plan. For here, you know more than most that the world does not owe Britain a living. Car manufacturing is fiercely competitive. Components can be sourced from around the world. And you know there are hundreds of companies in dozens of countries that would like to be manufacturing the products you make here. And it's only because of your skill and your professional approach that the work comes here to this company. If the quality slipped or the costs went up or the company was badly run, then the jobs would go elsewhere. And what is true of this company is true of our country. It's because the rest of the world sees that Britain is a country where we're now back in control of our destiny, a country where we're supporting businesses. The jobs are being created across our country. Over 1 million new jobs. But if our country is badly run, if the finances are in a mess and the costs go up and businesses don't feel welcome, then jobs would quickly disappear from Britain again. Our country was in a real mess a few years ago, more so than almost any other major country in the world. And hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs. Millions of families like yours have seen their incomes squeezed. Britain was made a lot poorer. And that is the terrible price people totally unconnected with politics and politicians pay when you get the wrong economic policy. It's why getting the right plan and holding to it is so important. We've got the right plan now. It's a long-term plan for turning our country around. And I've never promised it was going to be easy. I went out of my way to say the opposite and to be open with you about the difficult sacrifices we had to make. And like the success of this company, it's been a team effort with a lot of hard work. And now that team effort is paying off. The plan is working. For the first time in a long time, there's a real sense that Britain is on the rise. Jobs are being created. The deficit is coming down. And that brings its own risks. As we start the new year, I want to warn you about a dangerous new complacency around in our politics at the moment. You hear some of my political opponents talking as if the hard part of the job is done and we can go back to the old habits. But beware the opposition politicians who come along this year and promise you easy answers, no more sacrifices, just more spending on this, all paid for by more borrowing. It was these same promises from these same politicians that brought economic ruin and reckless debt to our country, and they would do so all over again. But the truth is, there are still plenty of risks out there. Our biggest trading partner, the Eurozone, is still weak, and there are fears about slowing growth in emerging economies further afield. Here at home, the banking system is still not working as we need it to do, so we're still fixing it. And we've got to do even more to encourage the exports and the investment and the saving our economy needs for a responsible recovery. Above all, we've still got a huge amount to do to reduce the deficit and to get our debts falling. And it's worth remembering, as the festive season comes to an end, that our own independent Office for Budget Responsibility is predicting a slowing of quarterly GDP growth this year. So it is far too soon to say, job done. It's not even half done. That's why 2014 is the year of hard truths, the year when Britain faces a choice. Do we say the worst is over? Back we go to our bad habits of borrowing and spending and living beyond our means and let the next generation pay the bill? Or do we say to ourselves, yes, because of our plan, things are getting better, but there is still a long way to go, and there are big underlying problems we have to fix in our economy. More repairs, more cuts, more difficult decisions. That's the choice in 2014, to go on working through a plan that is delivering for Britain, putting us back in control of our destiny with the security and peace of mind that brings, or squander what we've achieved and go back to economic ruin. And ultimately, more choice, a choice for the British people. The long-term economic plan has 5 key parts to it. The first is to go on reducing the deficit so we deal with our debts, because that's the only way to safeguard our economy for the long term and keep mortgage rates low. If 2014 is a year of hard truths for our country, then it starts with this one. Britain should never return to the levels of spending of the last government. We'd either have to return borrowing to the dangerous levels that threatened our stability, or we'd have to raise taxes so much we'd put our country out of business. Government is going to have to be permanently smaller, and so too is our welfare system. Now, when I took this job, Britain was borrowing more than £400 million every single day to pay for government spending. But as a result of the painful cuts we made, the deficit is down by 1/3, and we're borrowing nearly £3,000 less for every one of you and for every family in this country. That's the good news. The bad news is that there's still a long way to go. We're borrowing around £100 billion a year and paying half that money a year in interest just to service our debts. So we've got to make more cuts. £17 billion this coming year, £20 billion next year, and over £25 billion further across the 2 years after that. That's more than £60 billion in total. And some politicians like to say they deal with the deficit, but they shy away from committing to the numbers. So this year, we're going to ask Parliament to vote on these plans. I want our country's commitment to economic stability entrenched. And even after we've reduced the amount we borrow each year, that still leaves us with a high all the past borrowing. That debt leaves Britain vulnerable, and I want to make us safe. So I'm going to ask Parliament to vote too this year on a new charter for budget responsibility that will commit us to reducing those debts. It means not spending again when borrowing falls, including using surpluses in good years to reduce debt. So in future, we fix the roof when the sun is shining. These votes will force Parliament to make a choice and confront the truth. We also need to confront truths about the cost of living. I know it has been hard for families since the crash. It's not a case of not understanding these difficulties. It's a case of being honest about why things are difficult and what we can actually do to make things better. The truth is that Britain is poorer because of that great recession that happened, and families feel that. And as the economy recovers, so too will family finances. People's earnings are expected to go up, inflation has fallen, and that helps. So too does the government's action to cut the costs we impose on your family gas and electricity bills. But there's no point pretending that there's some magic wand that a chancellor can wave to make the whole country feel richer than it actually is, or that I can control the global oil price from an office in Whitehall. Simply not being straight with people. And the only way to improve people's living standards for the long term is for Britain to earn its way in the world and create more better jobs, just as this company is doing every day. If government wants to find a direct way to put money into people's pockets, you do that by permanently cutting people's taxes, by permanently cutting the spending those taxes pay for. That's what the second part of our long-term plan is all about, cutting fuel duty to help hard-working people be more financially secure. This April, you'll see what that means in your wage packet. That's when we increase the tax-free allowance to £10,000, and it means in total an extra £60 or so a month for the typical worker. I'm also freezing fuel duty again this year, so your car will cost £11 less to fill up than it would have done. And from next year, there will be tax-free childcare to help working families. Making tax promises like these is meaningless unless you're prepared to say how you pay for them. And we've paid for every single pound's worth of these tax cuts, all 50 billion in total, without a single penny of extra borrowing, because we've made the savings needed in the cost of government. It's all about fairness and whose side you're on. And while no sensible chancellor ever rules out tax changes, our whole economic plan can be delivered by reducing spending further, not by increasing taxes. That's how you create a country where people who work hard and want to get on are supported. Now, you all know that there is no better financial security than having a job. And so that's the third part of our plan, creating more jobs by backing small business and enterprise with better infrastructure and lower jobs taxes. Thanks to this plan, there are now a record number of people in work in this country. But as you know, here at Sertec, the competition is fierce and the work can go anywhere in the world. If we're going to go on being a country where companies grow, invest, want to take on new people, then we've got to make ourselves the best place in the world to do business. That's why I'm cutting business taxes, introducing an employment allowance that will benefit small firms most. That's why I'm helping with high street business rates, and now I'm abolishing the jobs tax altogether at the age of 21. These are all steps we're taking as part of our plan to create more jobs in Britain. Now, my political opponents say they do the opposite. They say businesses should pay more with a higher corporate tax rate. I think that would send a disastrous signal to the rest of the world about the direction that Britain was heading in. It would cost jobs and investment, and it would be a massive own goal for Britain. And it'd also be a mistake if we didn't invest in the future infrastructure that our country needs to be prosperous, like the new power plants that keep factories like this going, the roads and the railways and the broadband that carry our goods and services. That's why we've made spending on these things the priority when money is tight. It's why I say we need more homes and to support families who dream of owning a home with our Help to Buy. And it's why we're prepared to take controversial decisions on long-term things like high-speed rail and the search for cheaper gas in shale. Because I don't want to condemn our country to aging infrastructure and expensive energy when so many others in the world are heading in the direction of the future. A strong economy and a fair economy go hand in hand, and we have to make sure the recovery supports those who work hard and play by the rules. That's why the fourth part of our economic plan is reducing immigration and capping welfare. Now, migration, when it's controlled, is an important part of a successful economy. But uncontrolled immigration, of the kind we saw over the last decade, brings pressure on public services and leads to abuse of our welfare system. That's why we've tightened up the rules so people can't just come to this country to claim benefits anymore. And it's why, for the first time, we've introduced an immigration cap. And that new fairness applies across our welfare system too. Now, Britain is a proud country that does, and in my view always should, protect the most vulnerable through our welfare system. But it should not be a welfare system that offers up benefits as a lifestyle choice. We need to be fair to those who need our welfare system and fair to those like you who pay their taxes for that system. Benefits are now capped, so no family gets more from being out of work than the average family gets from being in work. And with our new universal credit, we're going to make sure it always pays to work. In 2014, we're bringing in more changes. The long-term unemployed are no longer going to get something for nothing. They're going to have to put something back into their community, including compulsory work with our Help to Work. And this year, for the first time, we will set a cap on the overall welfare budget so it can be properly controlled. Now, state pensions won't be included in that cap. As the Prime Minister was saying this weekend, we are committed to giving everyone who's worked hard and saved hard through their lives the generous state pension they deserve, and the country can only afford to do that because of the difficult decisions we've taken, increasing the pension age as the population lives longer. That saves many billions of pounds, and we need to save billions more from the rest of the welfare budget. When you think about the competition this factory faces from around the globe and the kind of world your children are going to grow up in, wouldn't it make more sense that your government was spending your money on things like schools and science and a better NHS than more welfare? So here's another hard truth. Welfare cannot be protected from further substantial cuts. I can tell you today that on the Treasury's current forecasts, £12 billion of further welfare cuts are needed in the first 2 years of the next Parliament to reduce the deficit without even faster cuts to government departments or big tax rises on people. So when you see politicians on the telly who say that welfare can't be cut anymore, or even worse, promising that they'll reverse the changes we've already made and increase, say, housing benefit, ask yourself this: what public services would they cut instead? What taxes would they put up instead? Or would they borrow and spend more and risk our country's economic stability again? That is what I mean when I say that Britain has got a choice. And the truth is, there are no easy options here. And if we are to fix our country's problems and not leave debts to our children to pay off, then cutting the welfare bill further is the kind of decision we need to make. Now, the final part of our economic plan is all about delivering the best schools and skills for young people so the next generation can succeed in the global race. I want the new jobs being advertised here at this company to go to local kids coming out of the schools and colleges here. But that's only going to happen if standards are high enough. And one of the most depressing discoveries of last year was that over the last decade, Britain's education fell even further behind other countries in the world. Reversing that is essential. And that's why we're turning more and more schools into academies and creating new free schools. It's why we insist on exam standards that are more rigorous. It's why we're also creating many more apprenticeships so that more young adults get a chance to earn and learn in companies like this. And it was great meeting some of your apprentices earlier. And this autumn, we'll start lifting the cap we impose on the number of university students. If Britain is going to compete in the global race to the top, there should be no limits on aspiration for young people to develop their talents to the maximum. That's our long-term plan with 5 key points: cutting the deficit, reducing taxes for hard-working people, creating more jobs by backing business, capping immigration and welfare, delivering the best schools and skills. It is a plan that is working. But growing the economy, helping businesses succeed, reducing the deficit, these are not an end in themselves. They are a means to an end. So let me set out clearly what that end is, what our long-term economic plan is really for, what the motivation behind it is. Our plan is about more than rescuing our economy from the brink of collapse. It's about instilling a new belief in Britain so we can all live in a country that is in control of its own destiny in this world. A country where we can have the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can provide for your family. A country that offers security and a better life for the next generation. Peace of mind, security, a better life for our children, controlling our own destiny. Our economic plan is for the long term. And just as there are no shortcuts to the work that you do here, there's no shortcut to that economic security for Britain. Thanks to the hard work of the British people, our economy is on the mend, and our country is doing better. But what was hard won can be easily lost. So we have this choice in 2014. We can give up, go back to square one, risk everything, or we can confront the hard truth that more difficult decisions are needed and work through the plan that is turning Britain around. I say, let's finish the job. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chancellor They're laying out the
take a few
plans
questions.
for the future and beyond there, next year and beyond. He's going to take some questions, I believe, from the audience and indeed from journalists. Let's listen.
Ed, you'd explain to everyone who you are, if they don't already know.
Thank you, Chancellor. Yeah, Ed Conway from Sky News. A lot of people will have listened to your speech today and asked themselves, why are you being quite so gloomy? The economy is recovering. We're seeing the strongest growth we have done since the start of the crisis, and it's better than in many other economies in the G7. I mean, when do you permit yourself a smile and to say that we are actually in a decent position? Next year, the year after, when's that happen?
Well, look, Britain is on the rise. Our economy is doing better. We're here at a great company that's just announced 400 more jobs it's going to be creating over the next 4 years. I just want to make sure that we don't squander what we've achieved and go back to square one, and that's the choice. We've got to go on making difficult decisions. We still have a big deficit that needs to come down. We've got to go on helping businesses create jobs. And I think if we abandon that plan now and say, you know what, we can go on borrowing, we can now start borrowing and spending, we can start taxing businesses more and going to war against business, then I think we'll be back to that square one. So yeah, I'm confident about the improvements you're seeing in the British economy, but I'm equally clear that we've got to stick with that plan in order to see those achievements delivered over the coming year. Right, another question. Who's got a question there? Question, Ross Hawkins.
Ross Hawkins from the BBC. You spoke about a couple of potential extra welfare cuts on the radio this morning. If you were to have to cut £12 billion a year out of welfare, you'd need more than a housing benefit change. Have you any ideas how you might do it? You said your whole economic plan can be delivered by cutting spending, not tax rises. You caveated it a bit, but how close are we to a promise that if there aren't big external shocks, the Conservatives will go into the next election promising not to raise tax rises?
Well, no sensible chancellor rules out tax changes, but I'm clear that our economic plan, our plan to reduce the deficit, can be delivered through further spending reductions, including reductions in welfare, rather than increasing taxes. Now, when it comes to the choices we have to make in welfare, and as I say, if you don't want to cut welfare, you've got to cut public services, or you've got to put people's taxes up, or you've got to borrow more. When it comes to the choices we make in welfare, I want to go on creating a welfare system that is fair. Fair to those who need it and make sure it protects the most vulnerable, but also fair to those who pay for it, such as the people here who work and pay their taxes. And I gave examples, like, for example, housing benefit. Like, many people cannot afford when they're aged 19, 20 to go and have their own flat, right? They have to live with their parents. And of course, we want to have more people buying their own home or moving into their own home. But under our housing benefit rules, some people on 18 or 19 years old can go and get that flat. Now, that's paid for by other people who are working. I just don't think that's fair. So that's one example. Another example is we've got some people on incomes of £60,000, £70,000 a year in council homes where the rent is cheaper. Now, is that fair? Is that the best use of our council housing stock? Is that the best use of money in this country? So there are going to be a number of these choices we've got to make as a country. I'm starting that debate today. I'm not ending that debate today. But what I'm clear about is we've got to answer these questions, and politicians who come along this year and just say we can spend more on this, more on that, we don't have to take any more difficult decisions, or answer those questions with a bland, well, of course we'll deal with it, are not fronting up to the difficult choices we need to make if we're going to secure this economic recovery. Who's got another question? Gentleman here.
Can or should the government do more to entice students into working into commercial manufacturing, industry?
I think the short answer to that is yes. I don't think we've been very good as a country at encouraging what they call vocational training. That's why we've got over 1.5 million apprentice starts over this period. But I think it's also about working more closely with the industry. You're part of the car industry, the automotive industry. And I think we've got a much better working relationship now, not just with the big car companies like JLR, which is such a great success here, but also the supply chain like Sertec. Working out, like, what are the skills you need from the youngsters who are leaving the schools and the colleges, so you can take them on and give them great careers in companies like this. And we now sit around the table with the companies and try and coordinate better what the education system's doing with what the companies need. And I think that more collaborative approach is working really well for our country at the moment. Who's got another question? Richard Edgar.
Thank you very much. Richard Edgar, ITV News. Chancellor, similarly to what Ed was saying, there's been some very positive news about the economy, and the forecasts for the year ahead are rather optimistic. Yet you're saying to the country, vote for me and I'll give you years more austerity. That's a very interesting way to go into the next election.
Look, what I'm saying is, if you want to see the British economy continue to recover, if you want to stick with the plan that has got us here and work through that plan, then you need to confront the difficult decisions. There is a deficit. It exists. You can either pretend it doesn't, or you can do what I've done, which is confront it, make difficult that deficit. If you don't deal with problems like that, then our economy will go into reverse and we'll go back to square one as a country. So yes, I'm optimistic about what I see in the British economy at the moment, optimistic about what I see in the Midlands and in companies like this. But the only way to provide an environment in which this company can grow, succeed, make these long-term investment decisions of the kind it's making is because they can be clear there's a government in control of the public finances and determined to make sure that Britain is in control of its economic destiny.
Well, there we have it. Chancellor George Osborne making it very clear in their first major political speech of the new year that he will not stray from the path of deficit reduction, that 2014 will be, as he terms it, the year of hard truths, where continuing tough decisions and more cuts will have to be made.
Well, look, we do get...
We'll leave the Chancellor there at the end of his speech in Birmingham, and let's remind you now of the headlines.